Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Aravosis Report. John Aravosis here. Hello, all. How are you this evening? Friday. Friday. Ooh, man, I was tired. The elections took a lot out of me this week. How's everybody doing? I'm going to wait a second before we start TikTok because that seems to kick in very quickly lately. So gives you guys a chance to say hi and all. Hopefully you can all hear me. Just give me a sign of life on YouTube there so I know you're alive. It says you're alive. I'm trusting you all. All right. Well, why don't you do the little like checking in thing you guys do? There you are. All right. I was a little afraid. I think it's probably delayed a little tonight too. Its usual thing. Will you hear me? Horton here's a who. All right, I'm going to go live on TikTok now. Da, 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 da. Exactly. Let people know where you're from as usual. All right. Mirror my camera. Excellent. Now we'll wait for the TikTokers. Hey, Melanie Sorensen. Maps. There will be some maps. I saw you all discussing maps. I don't know. Ironically, it may not be too map heavy. We'll see. It'll be sort of the same. Same issues. Hello, Paul Gray. Oh, 2 Australians in a row. Whoa. Hey, Stoven and Cindy on TikTok. Good to see you all. As my allergies kick in. Oh, man. Not as busy a day. Thank you, Melto. That's always been one of my favorites. I think it's beautiful. The whole I mean, I'm also into all the science and sci-fi stuff, but I also think that's one of the more beautiful images that they do on TikTok. Thank you for that. Oh, man, guys. All right, we'll take another 20, 30 seconds, and then I will kick right in, guys, and we will start with our show. Just, and actually, even while I'm talking, do the little hello and where you guys are from. It's sort of a tradition we started early on, and it's kind of neat for people to see. And my voice is misbehaving tonight. In case you just noticed, I said early on, it's being weird again. I'm Katharine Hepburn. Anyway, I am John Aravosis. Welcome, everybody. This is my show, The Aravosis Report, where every day, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., we talk about we talk about Twitter. Thank you, D. I was reading the comments. No, we talk about Ukraine and the latest news from the war. Thank you, Nat. Today's news, very good. The big story I'm going to be talking about is going to be the liberation of Kherson, the major city in the Kherson Oblast in the south, what the repercussions are, implications for Putin and the Russians. Looks real. We were wondering if this was a fake. Doesn't look like a fake now. Doesn't mean the Russians still aren't planning something. We'll talk about that. I'm going to write myself a little note, but it's good news. So just to let folks know how we do this, thank you, NATObot. I will talk for 20, 25 minutes maybe. I will give you guys the news of the day. We will then shift over to questions and answers. I will take your questions. On TikTok, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A link. Thank you, JSS. Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Especially considering what you went through. I appreciate that. We accidentally blocked JSS yesterday. Thank you, Inspired. JSS was answering my question about run rate of companies, but the way he answered it made it sound like he was being snarky, and he really wasn't. So he's back. I should say, or she's back. I'm forgetting. I think you're a he. So thanks for joining us, and thank you for the gift. That was incredibly generous of you. Thank you. Oh, the wave. That's right. The wave. All right. So the way we do this, on TikTok, submit questions in the Q&A link in my bio. The rest of you obviously use the links at the bottom of the comment box. And the best thing you guys can do to help me, because I am independent media, is to subscribe and follow. So please hit that on TikTok and everywhere else. Thank you for the gift there, L. And please keep the gifts coming. They're very helpful, whether they're super chat questions or super stickers or the gifts on TikTok. They actually do make a big difference and help. So thank you for that. Let me get rolling here. So Kherson. So the city of Kherson looks like it's been liberated. Amazing videos today out of Ukraine. I posted several of them on TikTok. You guys can go over there and check them out later. Showing, crowds of people in the town square in Kherson, rising up, welcoming the soldiers, women. I mean, it's beautiful. Women, men. In one of them, there's a man crying, like an older Ukrainian man who's wiping tears. Women running up to the soldiers and giving them flowers. I mean, it's absolutely the sweetest thing you've ever seen. as you may know, in the last few days, we had, the Ukrainians had been closing in on this town for a while. The Russians then announced maybe 2 days ago, the Russian defense minister, that they are abandoning the town. And a lot of us were looking at this going, sure you are, right? Like the Russians are going to tell the Ukrainians this. The one possibility of the Russians actually telling the truth here, thank you, Dogleap, is that perhaps the Russians were trying to come clean with their own people because Putin and the Ministry of Defense were getting a lot of pushback from the Russian people that were frankly pretty pissed that things kept going poorly after Putin and the Ministry of Defense kept saying things were going well. And mind you, Russia's a dictatorship more than ever now. So it's not like you're going to get the truth on television, but nonetheless, by saying the war was going so well, thank you, Win with Sam, and then by having the massive defeat in Kyiv, the capital, that first month, remember when the Russians got just shoved all the way back to the border? Thank you, Kathy. That's our second whale today. Thank you, Kath. They're getting pushed back to the border. Then we had the Russian route in eastern Ukraine, in Kharkiv, where maybe now 2 months ago, the Ukrainians started just massively pushing the Russians, and this would now be the third route. The third route, meaning horrific military defeat for the Russians. Thank you, Ellen. In Kharkiv, in Kherson. Now, just to get my handy-dandy map out, and thank you, Addie, to give you a sense, moving my things on the floor, give you a sense of what we're talking about. So I just talked about the three big routes the Russians had. The first was being pushed back from Kyiv. Boom. First month of the war. Then we had eastern Ukraine, Kharkiv. The Russians were all over here and got just shoved all the way back here. Doesn't look like much. It was a lot. And it was fast. A lot of Russians got killed. A lot of Russian equipment got taken by the Ukrainians because the Russians had to evacuate so quickly. They were basically in a panic, and their troops were in a panic. So big deal here. Somebody showing watermelons, just to let you all know, the watermelon is one of the, I would say, informal symbols of Ukraine, because at least Kherson, the region down here, but maybe the east as well, produces a incredible number of watermelons. It's kind of a symbol of Ukraine. So the third big route we're talking about right now is in Kherson. Kherson is the province down here, okay? Now, to put this in a little bit of larger context, thank you, Ellen, the territory that Russia currently controls in Ukraine, okay? They've got Crimea, the peninsula. So thank you, Dawn. That was Dawn brought up the watermelon. That was incredibly generous of you, Dawn. Thank you. I know that's a nice one. I appreciate that. Crimea in the south here, the Russians invaded and took in 2014, okay? Then when the Russians invaded this time, they ended up taking this, and this, okay? Some of it, 100% of this province, 50% of this province, maybe 50% of this province, pretty much 100% of this province. Well, the Ukrainians, this province is split not in half, but maybe 40-60, okay? Split by the river. The province of Kherson is the one we're talking about, okay? Split by the river Dnipro. Now, this river cuts Ukraine in half. It may look like a number of lakes on the map, but it's actually a river. The river goes all the way through like this, all the way up through Kyiv, the capital, all the way up to Belarus, okay? Cuts Ukraine in half. Well, generally speaking, the Russian troops have been on the east and the south of the river. So they've been over here, over here, over here, and then you come to the river and they're just hugging the river on the south, over here, down here. But right here in the northern region of the Kherson province, or called Oblast in Ukrainian, you had about 20,000 Russian troops, maybe as many as 30,000 north of the river. Well, that puts them in a really precarious situation, and the Ukrainians knew it, and they have been just blowing these guys up for a few months now. Thank you, Jesse. Because if you got 20 or 30,000 troops here and another 50,000 troops here, these guys up here are cut off from these guys. They've got to cross the river to get supplies. They've got to cross the river to escape as well, right? If the Ukrainians start really, like they have in other regions, start pushing and pushing, and the Russians keep falling back, you can only fall back so far until your back's against the river. Well, then you got to cross the river. Well, the Ukrainians pretty much blew up the bridges pretty effectively, crossing that river. Thank you, great CFI. crossing that river, so that while the Russians might have been able to cross by foot, thank you, Phoenix, for that, they would have had to leave all their equipment behind. They wouldn't be able to get reinforcements, whether it's weapons, even food deliveries would be difficult. So the Russians found themselves in a really bad spot here. And finally, with the Ukrainians advancing, the Russians decided to pull out and pull south of the river. Now, there is still a chance that there's pockets of Russians inside towns like Kherson city itself. One thing I always like to explain whenever we're looking at these maps is the Ukrainians do something kind of confusing. We love our Ukrainians, but they name the regional capital the same name as the region. So the region is called Kherson. The capital is called Kherson, right? The region's called Zaporizhia. The capital's called Zaporizhia. It's that way through everything. So you will keep hearing about Kherson being liberated. That means the city of Kherson was liberated, not the entire region. Now, having said that, what the Ukrainians are doing now, the Ukrainians pretty much are taking all of this territory north of the river. In the last few days, actually, was it the last day? I don't think it's the last day. I think it's the last few days. The Russians, in the past few days, the Russians have lost nearly 40% of the province of Kherson to the Ukrainians. Now, I say lost. This was Ukrainian land. It is Ukrainian land. So the Ukrainians regained it, but incredibly embarrassed for Russia in terms of how much they lost there. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. Very, very sweet of you. Let me look at the rest of my notes here. The Russians did abandon a number of supplies, including artillery rounds in the Kherson region, which has been very helpful. Thank you, Annie. Whale number 3. We got our wave. Wave, wave. I don't know if I'm going to do the voice wave. I will at least do this. At least I'll do the wave with my hands when you guys do that. Thank you. What else we got here? This was the third big setbacks. There have been reports that some Russian troops are hanging back in the town of Kherson in disguise. Whether they are Russians that literally abandoned their own, units, or whether they are basically snipers and others who are holding back to cause mayhem, we don't know. The Ukrainians are still assuming that the Russians are up to no good in this region. I mean, not just in this region, in the town and in the area there in the north of Kherson. So they know to be careful with that. What else I've got? Okay, I'll do a quick reset. I am John Aravosis. You are watching the Aravosis Report. This is my daily show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, in which I summarize the latest news from Ukraine, try to give you a sense of what I think is important and what I think it means, and then we do questions and answers. Your Q&A on TikTok, feel free to use the Q&A box in my profile. That's probably the easiest way. On YouTube, feel free to submit questions in the comments or by super chat questions, which I will answer immediately. Paul Gray has one right now I will get to. Also, I will give priority to the SNN subscribers on TikTok and grab your guys' questions first. So if maybe some of the mods can explain to folks how to do that, I can always click the subscription button. Thank you, Donald, and thank you, Allie. All right, 2 questions here from Twitter or from YouTube. Excuse me. Any word on the status of the Nova Kakhovka Dam? Nothing yet. So one of the points I was going to mention is that there is concern. Let me just write a little note to myself. There is concern that the Russians may be preparing to blow up a dam in order to wash out this entire area. In other words, the Russians may literally have abandoned the city, but it doesn't mean they're not planning on causing mayhem. The risk is the town of Kherson, or the city of Kherson, I should say, is over here. Now, this poor city had 250,000 population. It's now down to 30,000 or 60,000, depending who you talk to. The Russians cut off the power. They cut off the water. They also did a lot of forced evacuations. I mean, horrific what they did to these folks. Well, there is, if you go just upstream a little, not much. I'm going to guess, looking at my map, 50 miles maybe. 50 miles upstream of the town of Kherson is right around here is the Kakhovka Dam. It is a dam. It is a, holding water back. Now, big deal here because there's concern. Thank you for the hat there. There is concern. Was that whoever that was? Oh, Ellen. There is concern that the Russians may be preparing to blow up a dam here. The Ukrainians say they've had intelligence. They've been warning about it. If this dam were to blow up, It would flood this entire region here. It would kill a lot of Ukrainian troops. Thank you for Inspired Woman. It would also create a flood that would stop Ukrainian troops from coming down and going further south. You got to remember, Russia is here, okay? And then they were up here too. This up here is free Ukraine. The Ukrainians were coming from here, from here, from here in order to push the Russians further south. So one of the reasons they blow up the dam is just to create a massive flood that the Ukrainians can't pass. The second reason is if the Ukrainian troops are already there, they get flooded out, they die. A third reason that has people very concerned, and a number of you kind of looked into it for me, if this dam blows up, this dam has created a reservoir up here, and actually you can see how the river is actually thicker up here. The dam has created a reservoir up here that is used by the Zaporizhia nuclear plant to cool its fuel rods. If the water levels were to drop precipitously because the dam were to break, the nuclear plant might not be able to get the water it needs to cool the fuel rods, and that could cause a nuclear meltdown, which would obviously be horrific. And again, we're talking about Russia, so you really can't put anything beyond them. It's a possibility. I will say this, from what I am reading, there is no intelligence saying the Russians are preparing to do either of these, but it's Russia. There's concern. Let me see what else I got here. So let's talk a little bit about why this area is important. And I mean, pretty much you would have gleaned from just looking at the news that there's something important about this, right? Because for some reason, actually, hold on a second. Let me look really quick. Music Girl, thank you for that. I did have a second question I was going to pull up really quick. I've got that one. That one's coming up. Yes. Bash Brannigan. I'm going to mention a wall that Zelensky's building with Belarus. I am going to get to that's at the end of the news. I've got that one. So thank you for bringing it up, but I am going to get to it. Don't fret not. So why is this so important? You keep hearing about, wow, this town is evacuated. Oh my God. Clearly it's not just any old town. Well, several things going on here. One, as I told you, it is a regional capital, but it is the only regional capital that the Russians have been able to capture. They didn't capture Kharkiv. They didn't capture Luhansk and Donetsk. They haven't captured any of the regional capitals. Zaporizhia, the Zaporizhia province, they control a lot of it, but not the capital. That's the first thing. It was the first and only capital that Putin captured. Second of all, it is about 100 miles or 160 kilometers from Odessa. Hard to see on my map, but Odessa is right here. Odessa, very famous old Ukrainian city. Thank you, Edith, for that. Very old, famous Ukrainian city, very, long history, culture, tourism, and huge port that the Ukrainians need for exporting their grain, for example. Kherson itself is another very big port as well that the Ukrainians use. It is Putin's goal, eventually, if he can, to take Odessa, because he wants to cut off all of southern Ukraine so that Ukraine no longer has access to the sea at all. The only way that Ukraine can access the sea is in the south. Everything else is landlocked. Even though this is blue, it's not really blue. You're talking here, you've got like Romania, Hungary, Slovakia. I'm going to mix some of these, Poland, Belarus, and then this is all Russia. Down here is Turkey. This here is the area that Ukraine accesses the sea, the Black Sea. Well, this is all occupied by Russia. So these ports are out of commission right now. This is occupied by Russia. This is still free. So Putin's goal here is to go over here, take Odessa, take all of this, and totally cut Ukraine off so it now becomes a landlocked nation. Well, most of Ukraine's grain, for example, its major export. Thank you, Kathy, for the universe there. Not universe, galaxy. I know the galaxy. One of the was saying here, as I was looking at the galaxy. Thank you for that. One of Putin's goals here is to stop Ukraine from being able to export grain because it will help the Ukrainian economy collapse because they rely so much on grain. That's why he wants this. Second of all, Putin eventually wants to invade the rest of Ukraine, right? That was the goal from the beginning, was to basically take the entire country. Putin does not think that this is a real country, that Ukraine doesn't really exist, so to speak. Thank you, Dyke. Appreciate the galaxy. I would not call it a universe. If the Russians intend to ever take the rest of Ukraine, it will be very important for them to be, actually, they will be launching from here in Kherson, and it will be much easier if they're on the other side of the river than on this side. If they're on this side of the river, they've got the river as a barrier, and on the other side, the Ukrainians are going to dig in and dig in and dig in forever. This way, if the Russians are on the other side, the north side or the west side, they've got a better chance of attacking the rest of Ukraine. What else we got? Oh, finally, also Kherson up here, but even more so Kherson here. You got Crimea down here. Crimea is the territory Russia really cares about. It's the one Russia stole first in 2014, okay? Now, the Ukrainians, even where they are now, will be able to hit the main highways that come in and out of Crimea, which is a big deal. If they end up taking all of Kherson, they've now cut off Crimea from this land bridge that Russia built to going back to Russia itself. Russia's over here. Russia has always, Putin has, once he stole Crimea in 2014, he wanted to steal the land here so that he would literally have a land bridge roadway going all the way to Crimea. If the Ukrainians are able to take all of Kherson, that jeopardizes that. Oh, and final point, it's just embarrassing. The Russians, Putin, I want to say it was the end of September, early October. So we're talking just 5-6 weeks. Remember Putin had the big festival in Moscow and all the crazy, like, people looking really bored, where he announced that these 4 regions in Ukraine, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, that all of this has now been annexed and will now be part of Russia. Well, I got news for you. That part of Russia named Kherson City just became part of Ukraine again. And there are pictures, nonstop videos of people in that town going crazy because the Ukrainian troops are arriving. I mean, it's right. It what's the word? Gives proof to the lie. I think that's the expression that what Putin was saying about, 99% of the people want us there. Everybody in the streets is like, yay, the Russians are gone. Thank you, Marcy. And let me see who else that was. Oops. Ooh, it's hiding my gift thing. Oops. TikTok's being evil. TikTok's being evil. There we go. Oh, what did they take it away again? TikTok drives me crazy. TikTok just took away the feature. I hate you people. TikTok had a wonderful feature they gave me for like 3 weeks. Thank you for the gifts there, where I could touch a button at the bottom and pick whether I was looking at gifts or subscribers or whatever. They just took it away. God. Oh my God, they make me laugh. TikTok. I feel like Star Trek. Khan. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. As you can imagine, some of the Russians are not very happy that their country pulled out. You are very welcome, GMMC. I can speak enough Russian that I can see what you're saying there. I don't know what Pitrinku is. I do know what Giacomo Esasha is. So I'm going to assume you're thanking us for something good. You are very welcome. We are happy to help you. And the rest of the world as well. It's not just America. Europe's been helping a heck of a lot too. Thank you, Bonnie and Kanausi. So one Russian commentator, this was good in the New York Times. Listen to this. In an interview, Sergei Markov, a pro-Kremlin analyst, ticked off negative consequences of what he called Russia's defeat in Kherson. He lists off the consequences. He's not wrong here. A more motivated Ukrainian army, along with reassurance for its Western backers. This is true. The Ukrainians are going to be that much more yay, right? Which matters. Morale matters. Morale, hugely important in a military. Second of all, the Western backers, America and Europe especially, are going to be looking at this, and they're going to say, once again, you know what? These Ukrainians, they may be able to do this. Like, maybe our money isn't wasted after all, for the people who say it's wasted. And we'll get to that in a minute. That's another story. A drop in Russian military morale, a decline of public support for Russia in the areas it still occupies. Oh, because people there might fear that Russia would abandon them. Now, that's a really good point. If you're in one of the other areas and you're a collaborator, basically mean you're somebody who's, a Ukrainian who's willing to work for the enemy. Are you willing to work for the Russians now when it looks like the Russians aren't holding on very well, right? All of a sudden, even the locals who might work with the Russians are now hedging their bets and going, you know what? Maybe nice knowing you, Boris, but you can work on your own now. I don't know that I want to help, because what's happening, they're not getting killed. But what is happening is Ukrainians who are traitors working for the Russians in these occupied territories are getting 15-year jail sentences, which is, not something anybody wants to look forward to. Let me finish this. And I know I've got a couple super chats there. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, thank you, Kanowski. Oh, that's a nice one. We haven't had that one in a while with the postcard. Thank you. As we learned months ago, the postcard actually changes each time people do it, which is very cool. And even potentially a hit to Mr. Putin's popularity at home. All right, let me pull up a couple super chat questions we got here. Boom. Let me pull these up. 1 second. Glasses. What is the purpose of the G20? What will they say in pledge for Ukraine, and what will be said to Alaric? To Alaric? Who the heck's Alaric? The purpose of the G20. Oh God, don't put me on the spot here. I mean, it's an economic forum. It's an economic alliance. So, my guess is going to be, if somebody wants to Google the Wikipedia, it would be the countries helping themselves economically, but also working together to, lift the world economically, would be my guess of the G20 countries. Because especially the G20, it spans beyond like the G7 and those guys who tend to be the Europeans and America and Canada. Thank you for that. So somebody can Google, though, and maybe tell us what you find for the thank you, Marianne. I appreciate that. For the actual definition of the G20. And what will they say and pledge for Ukraine, and what will be said to Alaric? I'm not sure what they're going to pledge for Ukraine. The G20, the G20 is including Asian countries like Indonesia, who are, playing kind of their games. Even South Korea today, the U.S. is turning to South Korea to help replenish our artillery supplies. And as part of the negotiation, the South Koreans came out and said, you better not use any of the weapons we're giving you for Ukraine. So even South Korea, that is, a huge ally of the United States and who we do a lot for, is refusing to do anything that would be seen as providing deadly, military support to the Ukrainians. Melanie Sorensen, John, please take a peek at Zelensky's post-war wish list, i.e. border security, maritime protection, international alliances to deter future aggression, and let us know what's on his list. I mean, yeah, I don't have it in front of me now. I will say the most important thing is going to be deterrence against future aggression, which fits with border security. And the only way you're going to get that, I think, is NATO troops on the ground. I don't see how you do it otherwise. No promise we make to Ukraine is going to be enough. We saw that. There have been ample security assurances to Ukraine, and what happened was the Russians invaded anyway, and they're going to invade. No matter how this war ends, Russia is going to invade again until it's able to eat up all of Ukraine. I mean, that's going to happen. The only way you stop that is, one, letting Ukraine join, this is my opinion, letting Ukraine join NATO. That's not going to happen, right? I don't think NATO is going to, look at how, as much as the sorry, I'm looking at some of the comments here in Ukrainian. That's nice to see. Kherson ze Ukraina. I'm going to guess that means Kherson is Ukrainian. Excellent. And Privit is Avdiivka. Oh, Avdiivka. Oh, that's another part. We've got a couple Ukrainians here today. Dimitro and United. Yep. Give some sunflowers to our Ukrainians who are saying hi on TikTok. Sorry, let me get back to this real quick. So yeah, to me, I don't think NATO is going to let Ukraine in. Clearly, they're afraid of Putin. I think the only way you do it is by putting troops on the ground. And you put troops on the ground as a kind of tripwire, peacekeeping forces. Russia's not going to like it, but you basically put them there so that Russia can't afford to attack. So, God, we're getting even more Ukrainians here. Everybody's here. From Melitopol as well. Anka. Hi, Anka. Privit. I don't have too much Ukrainian. I've got a little more Russian, but not too much, but enough that I can read. How amazing. Kherson is being liberated on Armistice Day. Actually, that's a really good point. I meant to mention that Dragan is mentioning that today, November 11th, is Armistice Day. It's the day that World War I, the peace treaty, was signed. And in America, it's called Veterans Day, where we honor our veterans. But it is, a nice sort of symbolic move there. Oops. Now I want to make sure I'm not. Okay, I am missing a lot of. Oh boy, everything's coming in. You guys are out of control today. Thank you for all the super chats. It's like somebody had their coffee today. 1 second here, guys. I got super chat questions. I always promise just for any. Actually, let me just reset this. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my daily show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where I go over the latest news from Ukraine, and then we talk about. We do a question and answer period actually afterwards. What I do though, however, is folks that chip in on YouTube, because I'm watching them simultaneously, who buy the super chat questions, which they actually pay for. I will get to those immediately as a thank you for them doing that. So I've got a number of super chat questions. Let me get to these. Clifford Wolf. What is the Jeep 20? We did do Clifford. Melanie Dragana. Marianne being generous as always. Mike Santacarangelo. Whatever happened to the missing Russian sub? Oh, it actually popped up. It had popped up a few days after it was missing, so to speak. It was in the Arctic. And then the observers said, yeah, it made sense because it was just practicing. So it makes sense. It would have hidden itself for a few days. But the only other thing was they were testing the super torpedo, the nuclear torpedo. And I don't know, is the torpedo called a Poseidon, or was the new sub is called the Belgorod, I want to say, and the torpedo's called a Poseidon, I think. But they were testing it yesterday, and apparently it didn't go so well. So that was a good thing. Let me just look here. Okay, I think I'm caught up. Let me know if I'm not caught up on the super chat questions. I don't want to miss anybody there. All right. So Milley, General Milley, I wanted to talk about this. I brought this up last night. I may skip some of the stories tonight because I always sort of do this. If we get into a few different topics that we get more in depth, which I think is more interesting anyway, I skip sort of some of the smaller stories. Yes, it is the Belgorod. Okay, that's what I thought. So General Milley is America's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He is the uniformed head of the military. Note that I said uniformed, okay? The head of the military is the Secretary of Defense. That is Lloyd Austin. He is a civilian. Now, it is true that he used to be a general, but he is retired. He is now a civilian. In the United States and in, I'm assuming, every Western democracy, the head of the military, the top person, is a civilian because it's intentional because of trying to reinforce the importance of a democracy. Okay? I am Elinas, Americanos. It's important to reinforce the democracy. Okay? But the top military member in America is called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His name is General Mark Milley. Now, and this is kind of interesting because I had heard early on from reporters I talked to, I was complaining about Biden. And I was saying how I was not pleased that Biden was always worried about Putin. And he kept talking about, it's going to be World War III if we give Ukraine those fighter jets. Remember that whole discussion at the beginning of the war? And then, it's World War III if we give them American tanks. And it's always World War III. And then it's World War III if the Ukrainians take Crimea and blah, 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 blah. So, and now the same thing came up yesterday. American drones, yesterday, the day before. The U.S. is not going to give Ukraine our top drones because Putin might take it as being escalation, and then who knows what he does. You're like, stop it. Well, I was told that Biden wasn't the problem. Milley is the problem, that General Milley is the one in Biden's ear telling him, be careful, all hell could break loose with Russia. Well, there was an article out today in the New York Times, but everyone else is covering it too. I'm going to read you the two paragraphs from the Times on this. General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has made the case in internal meetings that the Ukrainians have achieved about as much as they could reasonably expect on the battlefield before winter sets in. Okay, now that part, probably true, because once winter sets in, the mud makes it impossible, and the mud's already there. The freezing makes it really difficult. So not totally wrong. So he makes the first statement kind of true before winter sets in. And so they should try to cement their gains at the bargaining table, according to officials informed about his discussions. So Milley is saying because winter is coming, and during winter it is expected that Ukraine will have fewer advances as they're having now because everything will get bogged down, that Ukraine should negotiate now and just do whatever they have to just lock in the wins that they've got. Now, if you negotiate to lock in the wins that you've got, you've still got 100%, 98% of this province gone. 50% of this province gone. 40 to 60%, I don't have the exact, maybe let's say 50. 50% of this province gone. 60% of this province gone. 100% of this province gone. And Milley wants them to lock this in. What is there to lock in? So let me go on, though. I mean, it really kind of boggles my mind. Also, there's a second paragraph I'm going to get to in a second here. But also, why would why the supposition here is that Russia is going to do better come spring, right? You lock in your gains because there's a risk of, or I should say, a realistic risk of losing what you just gained. Why is there a realistic risk or a significant risk of Russia doing better in spring than it's doing now? Russia has been doing, other than the initial sort of blitz, that Russia had, where they kind of came down to Kyiv and then they came in through the east and they were able to, and through the south, and they were able to take southern Ukraine. That all went well. Since the end of March, it's been kind of a disaster for Russia, right? Knocked out of the north. Now they're knocked out of the east, or they're getting knocked out, but really horrific. Now they're getting pushed down in the south. Why come spring should things be any better for Russia? The supposition here is that things are only going to get better for Russia as time goes on and worse for Ukraine, so lock it in. Well, as time goes on, the Ukrainian army is going to be even better trained, right? Because they've got these 10,000+ men and women who are being trained by actually all of NATO forces out of the UK, I believe. They keep getting better and better equipment from NATO. The Russians have run out of men. They've now conscripted another 200,000 men who have like no military background, if any. I mean, they've got very little, if any. A lot of them have none. No training. Some of these guys got no training at all and got sent to the front. Other ones got a couple hours of target practice, and that's it. They don't have tents. They don't have food. Why should these guys, what is going to turn these guys into a massive fighting force come spring? No, I mean, I'd like to hear Milley's argument for that. Now, the rest of the story. But other senior officials have resisted the idea, thank God, maintaining that neither side is ready to negotiate. That is true. And that any pause in the fighting would only give President Putin a chance to regroup. That is true as well. If Putin's running out of men, or now gets the new men there, but the new men don't know what they're doing, the old men who are the experts are either killed, injured, or exhausted, right? By having negotiations and having a ceasefire, you give everybody a chance to catch their breath, but it gives the Russians who are, bottom line, you're boxing with somebody. I mean, I'm not a boxer, but I can imagine this. You're boxing with somebody. No, you're running. Something we all can appreciate. A race, a running race. You're running with somebody, okay? And the other guy is getting more tired than you are. If we take a 1-month break in the race, who does it benefit more? The guy who's more tired or the guy who's less tired? Well, after you're both rested, you'll both be equally rested. But right now, the guy who's less tired is going to do much better than the guy who's more tired. If you stop, right? If you stop, it helps the person who's worse off. Russia is worse off. Would only give a chance. While Mr. Biden's advisors believe the war will likely be settled through negotiations eventually. Sure, eventually. I agree. They have concluded that the moment is not ripe, and the United States should not be seen as pressuring the Ukrainians to hold back while they have momentum. And that's a whole other point. Exactly. If the Ukrainians have momentum, basically meaning it seems like things are going well for them. They keep moving ahead. Why would you want to stop them? Right? I mean, in other words, even if you bought Milley's argument is basically you want to, it's kind of like invest. Actually, it is like investing. In a perfect world, you want to You want to buy a stock when it's at its lowest, and you want to sell it when it's at its highest. And Milley is saying, look, Ukraine stock is rising. They've got a lot of successes. Maybe they should sell that stock now, before something bad happens and it goes down again. Thank you, Azamak, for that. It just, I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, now mind you, he's not a dumb man. So I'm not going to say he's not a stupid man, but I think there are clearly two schools of thought in the United States right now about Vladimir Putin. And one school is to be deathly afraid of him. And the other is to treat him like we would any other enemy or any other adversary. And I'm of the second school because I'm not afraid of Putin. I'm not afraid of his nuclear weapons. He's not going to use nukes. I mean, I don't want to say it and then he uses nukes and everyone goes, you said he wouldn't use nukes. I mean, but we've got, first of all, sorry, my allergy is kicking in. We've got nuclear weapons. He's got nuclear weapons. He's certainly not using the nuclear weapons against us. That's never going to happen. Okay. He's not going to use them against NATO. That's not going to happen because he uses them against us. We use them against him and the world ends and he knows it. So that's the first thing going. Would he use them in Ukraine? My question would be, why? What does he get out of it? Right now, the only possible scenario I could see would be the Ukrainians get all their land back except Crimea, because Crimea is the one Putin really likes. It's the one he really doesn't want to give back, okay? Everything except Crimea. Then the Ukrainians start moving into Crimea and start taking Crimea back, and Putin says, that's it, I've had it. I'm going to drop some nuclear weapons. Unless he's crazy, and he's not crazy, what is Putin's analysis that tells him dropping nuclear weapons in Ukraine is somehow going to help, right? There has to be some rationale, some argument Putin's making that tells him, if I use nuclear weapons, I will be better off than if I don't use nuclear weapons, okay? Let me do a quick reset just to sort of remind the new folks, especially the TikTokers. I am John Aravosis. You are listening to the Aravosis Report. This is my daily show, Monday to Friday, where I talk about the latest news from Ukraine, sort of helping you guys sort of analyze what's going on with my foreign policy background, and then doing questions and answers, and we're doing Q&A and lots of stuff right now. Just to remind you, if you can help out by subscribing or following, I would very much appreciate that. Do please keep the gifts coming as well. They are, frankly, help pay the bills. So thank you for that. And if you want to find out more about me, my Discord community, my store that I've got up, just go to aravosis.com. That's my link tree. It's aravosis.com. And you'll find my Patreon, my Discord, my store, lots of stuff. So go check that out. So we're talking about Putin, right? So if he's going to use tactical nuclear weapons, which are the small nuclear weapons in Ukraine, Putin would use them only if he determines that it is to his benefit to use them. Well, what does Putin want out of this war? Putin wants not to lose. But there's a couple of reasons he doesn't want to lose. One, he wants Crimea. But two, if he loses Crimea, he could lose his job, right? And he doesn't want to lose his job. He could even lose his life. I mean, this is Russia we're talking, right? So there's a variety of reasons he doesn't want to lose Crimea. So then the question, thank you, Hector, becomes, does using a nuclear weapon help Putin stop from losing Crimea? Not really. The Ukrainian forces are spread out all over the place. It's not, I mean, this has been, thank you, LL Cool J. The military experts have been saying militarily, Putin actually doesn't get a benefit out of using these nuclear weapons in Ukraine. He just doesn't. It's a good terror weapon, meaning if you're trying to scare the Ukrainians, it'll scare them. But mind you, if these are Ukrainians we're talking about, it's not like using nuclear weapons is going to make the Ukrainians go, oh, Putin's scary. He's killed a lot of our people. Maybe now we'll just let him take the rest of our country, right? I mean, from what we all know about Ukrainians, that ain't happening, right? I mean, so he wouldn't use the nukes thinking Ukraine's going to give up. That's not going to happen. He wouldn't use the nukes thinking it's going to help militarily. That's not going to happen. So what benefit does he get? Now, let me give you the negative that would happen here, okay? Let me give you the negative. The negative that would happen is, okay, actually, no, John Hoover's raising a point that isn't a terrible point. Imagine you're in Ukraine and you hear that a nuke went off. The chaos and panic by the general population would disrupt the Ukrainian momentum and clog the logistics routes. Yes, you'd have panic. People might be on the highways trying to get out of the country. Fair enough. You might have that. Fair enough. But in terms of what's going to happen next, though, Putin uses a nuclear weapon. NATO joins the war. Now, I don't know in which way, shape, or form NATO joins the war, but if Putin used a nuclear weapon, I do not think in a million years that it's going to be a simple matter of, well, he used a nuclear weapon, so we're going to use a bomb against the forces that shot the weapon, right? Like we're going to drop a bomb in Mykolaiv, wherever, Mariupol, to hit the outfit that shot the nuclear weapon or something like that, right? If he uses a nuclear weapon, we're doing a hell of a lot more than that. There was talk of hitting the Russian Black Sea Fleet and destroying it, hitting Russian troops across Ukraine and destroying them, doing a no-fly zone finally across Ukraine that says, it's over, Vlad. We are taking control of the country. And if one of your planes takes off, one of your radar gets turned on, one of your surface-to-air missiles gets turned on, and we are blowing them out of the sky or blowing them out of the ground. Putin cannot win this war against Ukraine at this point. He does not want NATO to be a part of this war. So again, the problem I've got with this is, I don't disagree with John, it would cause chaos in Ukraine, and that might be a nice game changer for Putin if he were to use a nuke. But it means NATO's going to enter the war. And if NATO enters the war, it's over for Russia. It's just over. Unless Russia decides to nuke NATO. But again, logically, why would Russia do that? Right? They nuke us, we nuke them, and everybody dies. So they're not going to do that. The same reason we're not going to nuke Russia. No, it's just not. If Putin, fair question. So Cubit is saying if Putin used a nuke if used a nuke, NATO immediately strike, every military installation in Russia. Well, if Putin used a nuke against NATO, if Putin uses a nuke against Ukraine, we're not going to use a nuke against Putin. It's not going to happen. I don't think our president should say so publicly. But there's two things going on, okay? Let's say, like we said, Putin drops a nuke in here. He's right here, Crimea. So Ukraine is about to take Crimea. It's the one thing Putin cannot bear to lose. He drops a nuke here. Well, the Americans can't respond by dropping a nuke in Crimea because we're nuking Ukrainians and we're nuking Ukrainian land, right? And we might be nuking private citizens, and we would not do that. We did it in World War II for entirely different reasons, and it was also 70 years ago. Times have changed. This is not World War II. We're not talking about saving millions of lives, and it was 70 years ago. Attitudes have changed. Second of all, we're not going to nuke Ukraine, right? So who's the option? The option is to nuke Russia. Well, we're not going to nuke Russia because that would literally be World War III. Russia would nuke us and it would be the end of the world. This is the problem I've got with all of this. I just think that all of this analysis of Putin is based on fear. And you know what? I was around during the Soviet days. Things were scary back then. Very scary, especially, the early 80s when I was most at my wits because I was studying in graduate school and I went to the Soviet Union in 1984. It was scary place, scary leaders. We all hated each other. America and the Soviet Union, very bad. We all had a lot of nuclear weapons. And we survived, but we also did not approach it. We did not approach our relationship with the Soviet Union as constantly going, well, what would the Russians, would Brezhnev get mad at us? Maybe we shouldn't do it, right? If we give all the weapons in Afghanistan, Brezhnev will get mad at us, and Chernenko and Andropov. Maybe they'll escalate. As we say in Greek, nah. It kind of means like just go away. Very annoying. Let me look at more. I'm gonna skip the rest of the news that I've got written here because there's nothing too big here anyway. But we can look at more questions from you guys. I still can't believe that Twitter got rid of this crazy. TikTok got rid of this crazy thing at the bottom of my screen. Out of their minds. Out of their freaking minds. Anyway, all right. Let me look for more questions here from you guys. So up. TikTok questions. TikTok Q&A. At least that's back. Do you think NATO might wimp out and do nothing if Putin used tactical nuclear weapons? I mean, there's that chance. NATO had better not. Here's the thing. The only thing is, I think NATO, United States especially, but the Brits as well, understand that if Putin uses nuclear weapons, it's going to send a message to the rest of the world that nuclear weapons are okay to use if we do nothing or if we do only something small in response. We can't treat this like we did, sending some cruise missiles against, Gaddafi or something, right? I mean, the wall. Yeah, that's true. We'll talk about the wall. That is true. Thanks, Russian. But you can't just throw a few cruise missiles at this. Otherwise, the rest of the world learns that, having nuclear weapons, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, and look what happened. Ukraine got invaded by nuclear power, and the world didn't help. They helped, but they didn't really help. B, Russia invaded, a nuclear power invaded, and because they were a nuclear power, the rest of the world, even other nuclear powers like America, went, let's not help too much. We don't want them to lose because they're nuclear. Well, then maybe other everyone should want nuclear weapons. Nobody should give up their nuclear weapons. And if you're a nuclear power, go ahead and use your nukes because we're going to slap your hand. We're not going to actually do the catastrophic response that we promised. So let's see. They better have a catastrophic response in hand if Putin uses nukes. So we'll tell you this other story. So Ukraine is building a border wall with Belarus. This is kind of fascinating. Belarus is up here. It is a dictatorship run by a man named Lukashenko, big friend of Vladimir Putin. The border, all of this border, more or less, I forget exactly where Poland's over here, but where the border with Poland is. But more or less, it's this border here. The Belarusians, at Putin's urging, have been causing a lot of trouble up here to basically scare the Ukrainians into thinking that maybe Belarus is planning to invade again but the Russians would invade again with the Belarusians with them. Now, the reason they're trying to scare the Ukrainians into thinking this is because look at the map and Belarus is up here, this border. Look where the battles are actually happening. The two big battles happening right now are in Kherson down here and over here in eastern Kharkiv, over here. This and this are very far away from this. The Russians would like nothing better than to force the Ukrainians to move a ton of thousands of troops up here to defend this border just in case the Belarusians invade. Even though we don't really think the Belarusians are going to invade, they keep threatening it, or they keep making noises that are basically threatening. So that's what's going on. But in order to hedge their bets, the Ukrainians are now building a border wall, to basically make it harder for the Belarusians to cross. The information I've got on this, where was that? Where was this? Oh, here we go. Ukraine is constructing a concrete fence reinforced with barbed wire, a ditch, and an embankment to fortify its border with Belarus. The wall already spans 3 kilometers, so that's like 2 miles. It's not huge. It ain't huge. I mean, that's border. I'm looking at this. That border, this is probably 100 miles. I'm going to guess you're looking at a 400-mile border, 500-mile border. So a couple kilometers, a couple miles. Yeah, and I should have thrown that in case anybody was listening, Deb. I should have said, and reportedly Mexico's paying for it. But that was a good joke. I should have said that. All right, guys, let's do a few more questions. And I'm starting to lose my voice again, God forbid. So I'm definitely not going to go long tonight for that reason. Oh, actually, and let me do, I will reset again. John Aravosis, you're listening to the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., where we talk about the war in Ukraine. I go through the news that's happened, let you know my take on it, and take your questions. And I've got, as I said, a Discord set up. I've got a shop set up. I've got lots of different things. My Patreon, if you like my work and you want to help support me, please go to my Patreon. Thank you, Annie. I've got the Patreon set up to support the Discord, but you could just go to the Patreon and become a $5 a month subscriber just to help me. Even if you don't know what Discord is and don't care, just go to Patreon and become a subscriber, $5 a month, and it helps me out. I'm just trying to build that sort of big enough so it keeps this as a regular income stream. But I do appreciate it. And nonetheless, the super chats, which you guys have been crazy generous tonight with the super chats. Thank you so much. And the gifts on TikTok that are always welcome. And you guys have also been especially generous tonight. So thank you guys. All right, let me look for more here. Just looking if anybody else had thrown in anything on, okay. The YouTube. Oh, there we go. Ninth Prey found me on YouTube. There you go. Excellent. Excellent. All right, let me find another one here. If NATO enters the war, will China join Russia? I don't think so. I don't think so. First of all, NATO would enter the war because Russia used a nuke. If Russia uses a nuke, China is going to be in a very weird position on this. I mean, China already publicly came out about a week ago and said, nobody. Oh, thank you, Irina. Welcome. Irina on TikTok as well, joining us from Ukraine. But if he used a nuke, China is going to be in a very bad position where I think the last thing China is going to do is join the war at that point. I think China is going to be like, okay, because also you got to think from China's perspective, China cares about the economy. I mean, that China needs to keep growing, and China isn't growing like it was before. All of my life, most of my life, China's been having like 8%, 9%, 6 to 10% gross domestic product growth, or gross domestic product growth. Too many words. The growth in their GDP every year has been like from 6 to 10%, a crazy amount every year. That has finally slowed down. China is getting very worried about that. They've got a big country. They need to keep growing because they're still not first world economy in that regard. So they really can't afford, first of all, China really can't afford for there to be nukes and then this becomes a true world war. That doesn't help international trade at all. But especially if China, I mean, there's a lot of China kind of just can't afford it. Sorry, I was trying to see who did that. That was Dradster. Yeah, I feel like China has been sucking up to Russia. They've been putting out Russian propaganda. But if things got that bad, I don't know. Do we know? Thank you for the pancakes there. Who's the pancake person? Laura. Do we know the status of the advisors that gave Putin pre-war advice for invading? No. It depends what you mean by the advice for invading. I mean, what was happening, but of course, look, who knows who knows who did this? I mean, I would not be surprised, and we're sort of getting to the end here. I would not be surprised if, Putin decided they were going to invade, and then he said, make it happen. And they said, well, we don't know if we have enough troops or if they're qualified enough or whatever. Just do it, right? So Putin decided they were going to go in. Putin said, I don't care, make it happen. And whether or not they told Putin, mind you, there's also the concern that maybe they didn't tell Putin that their troops weren't really, qualified, that a lot of the money was stolen. I will say this. I saw an American report in the news in 2 or 3 weeks before the invasion, so this would be early February, that we had intercepted, now mind you, I'm assuming this is true, but that we intercepted a Russian communication from a local commander outside of Ukraine, a Russian, that was letting the commanders back in Moscow know, the generals, that they still didn't have enough men. And this was when Russia already had 160,000 troops or whatever it was. Basically, the final number of troops that Russia had before the invasion. And the commander let them know and said, this isn't enough. Now, our experts were saying this wasn't enough as well. So you had some people telling the truth. The question is whether that truth reached Putin. And if it did reach Putin, did he care? Now, Putin did eviscerate some of the, wasn't it I want to say the FSB office, which was their follow-on to the KGB dealing with Ukraine. He put some of the senior people, he arrested them. and then fired a bunch of the other lower level people. And I don't know at their Ministry of Defense if he did the same thing. But so who knows what's going to happen? But I'm sorry. The final point I'll make on that is, but Russia being Russia and Putin being a dictator, he ain't taking the fall for this. He's going to find somebody else to blame, and it'll probably be the Minister of Defense who better get out of that country fast. Why has Putin drafted 300,000 men if he's just going to retreat? Well, they ended up drafting 210,000 or something like that. They say they didn't train them. Most of these people don't have military experience, right? What this is showing is, and they're claiming that a lot of these new men, like 60, that a lot of these new men are already, go here. What is that? Just playing with my connection here. That a lot of these guys are already in Ukraine. I think you're desperate. Thank you, Azamak. I think you're desperate, right? You're losing. If you don't draft people, then everyone's going to say, you didn't even have a draft, right? We were losing and you didn't even have a draft. So now at least he's got they're cannon fodder, which is sad, but I think they really are cannon fodder, that nobody necessarily thinks they're going to make a difference, but they're like, at least they won't be able to say, I didn't try everything by sending these people there. It's terrible. No, it's terrible. All right, guys, it's 7:01. I will do a quick recap of the news, and I'll mention those stories that I didn't get to because I was going on too long. And 1 second here. And then I'm going to call it quits for the night because, as I said, my voice is getting a little raspy again, which happened a few months ago, so I don't want to do that again. But let me do the quick recap. Kherson City is liberated. The Russians have ceded nearly 40% of the region in just the past few days. There are reports that Russian troops are still in the town and the region in disguise, but we don't know if that's true. Why is the region important? It is the only regional capital that Putin has been able to capture. It is near Odessa. It's an important launching place to not just attack Odessa, but to attack the rest of Ukraine, which Putin wants to do eventually. It puts the Ukrainians closer to being able to attack the roads going in and out of Crimea. And it's just embarrassing. Putin announced early October, late September, that he was annexing this area, that he was making it part of Russia. And now 6 weeks later, a part of Russia. Oh, the best part, there are literally signs up in Kherson. And there's video today. I'm going to put one up on TikTok when I'm done. Wonderful video of these big signs that say, Kherson is Russia. And Kherson is Russia and will always be Russia. They put these signs up like a couple months ago, and 6 weeks after they declare that now Kherson is Russia, they just leave it and the Ukrainians take back over. It's embarrassing. It makes them look weak. I mentioned, then I gave a long quote from one Ukrainian commentator who was not happy at all and gave a very good analysis on how it was basically going to help Ukrainian morale, Western morale, and hurt Russian morale. The Kremlin spokesperson said that Russia continues to consider Kherson its territory. When you've got to say it, it means things aren't going so well. I then talked about reports that General Milley, our Joint Chief of Staff, was basically saying that Ukraine's gotten as much as it's going to get at this point, and Ukraine ought to negotiate. And I feel like he's being a bit of a wimp. German Chancellor Scholz, this was good. We didn't have time to say this. Listen to this. German Chancellor Scholz said today that during, quote, this murderous war that we are currently experiencing, end quote, thank you, Sesko, Russian President Putin is preventing diplomatic rapprochement with Ukraine. Scholz added that he opposes a ceasefire on Russia's terms. So Scholz is saying that it's the Russians' fault of why we can't have negotiations. And he opposes a ceasefire on Russia's terms, which is we should just have a ceasefire right now. And who cares? Let's just have a ceasefire right now, which would only help the Russians. So that actually is incredibly helpful language coming out of Scholz of Germany. The Washington Post says the South Koreans are negotiating to sell the U.S. artillery shells, but are insisting that the shells not be used in Ukraine. Ukraine is building a wall at the border with Belarus to stop the Belarusians from possibly invading in the northwest. The Netherlands allocated an additional 110 million euros to support Ukraine in winter. And Germany is sending Ukraine an additional 1 billion with a B euros for cyber defense and documenting war crimes. All right, kids, we are done. There you go. No, you are the best. Thank you, guys. This was great. Moderators, as always. God bless you. I'm guessing there were a decent number. I was sort of noticing trolls, but I was trying to ignore it because if I pay attention to the trolls, then I lose my train of thought, and it's way easier just not to. You know what? I will end with one funny thing to show you. Since yesterday's live, we had a long discussion about the disaster at Twitter at the end. For anybody who's interested, you can see it over on YouTube, my YouTube channel, John Aravosis DC, but I also put up about 20 minutes of it on TikTok. So you'll see the most recent 2 TikTok videos are each about 10 minutes long. It's because it's the live discussion we had about the Twitter mess that Elon's causing. That was really interesting, but I had to show you because this just popped up like earlier today. I'll show you guys next. People have been creating all sorts of fake accounts on TikTok because Musk changed it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but basically Elon Musk made it so that anybody can pay $8 a month and they can create, and they will get the same badge, that little blue check mark that accounts have that are verified. In other words, I have a verified account. I had to prove who I was, and I had to prove that I was noteworthy in some way. I was a journalist, activist, whatever. Now you pay $8 for all of these other features, and they give you the same mark that people who had to prove they literally are. I had to give them my ID. I had to give my driver's license to TikTok or to YouTube to prove who I was. Well, everyone said if you just give anyone the little mark who gives you money, they're all going to pretend to be different people. Well, people have been buying it, and they immediately changed their profile to Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, LeBron James, God, Jesus. So that was the most recent one. And after I read this, exactly, Jorgen is correct. After I read this, I found out Musk has now stopped the program. The program where you can get the little blue check by buying it. He stopped it temporarily. Because too many of the companies were furious. People were buying these things and they weren't fixing it. One company, I'm trying to remember who, one company today, it went on for like 6 hours that somebody stole their name. And not stole it, but was impersonating them, and impersonating them with a totally believable, is Eli? No, Eli Lilly is not suing. Get out of here. Are they actually suing? I was thinking about this earlier today. I mean, you've got FTC issues, Federal Trade Commission. But you've also got, from my perspective, this is gross negligence. They were told, Musk was told by everybody that it was, Musk was told by everybody that by doing this, people were going to steal profiles. It was going to be very easy. And he did it anyway. Then people started stealing profiles in essence and making and destroying, hurting brands by doing this. Not only did it take Musk hours to go after each brand that was being faked, but he let this continue for 2 days, knowing what a disaster it was. As a lawyer myself, I hear that and I hear ka-ching, because all of a sudden this isn't free speech and everything else. You made a business decision that you knew was a risk to my company, and you did it anyway. And then once you started having problems, and mind you, once people started faking it, they didn't have a system in place to catch the fakers. So it took them 3 to 6 hours to catch each faker. They still didn't pull it. And they let company after company after company get their brand damaged rather than just pull the program. No, it is asking. I did not see anything saying a lawsuit, but it is certainly begging for a lawsuit. But yeah, we'll see. Oh, Eli Lilly stock dips after imposter. Their stock dipped. Now you're going to have a lawsuit. Okay. Now you're going to have a lawsuit. And you could potentially have a lawsuit of Eli Lilly investors. Oh. Okay, that's bad. That's bad. Oh, yeah. The Eli Lilly investors are going to have some kind of a class action suit against Twitter now. Absolutely. Absolutely. Buy the dip. Yeah, buy the dip. But what if you had options set up or whatever, right? Something goes down, you lose money. Those people, it went down artificially because of what Musk did. And it was, boy, he is going to get sued. He's a disaster. All right, we're not doing this again. If you want to know my view on Elon Musk and Twitter, go to my TikTok, or if you're on YouTube, just go to the YouTube, look at yesterday's show. It's the last 30 minutes. I will say, final point, I was talking about Mastodon yesterday, and one of the founders of Mastodon came out, pretty much agreed with me on everything. So I'm feeling much better about Mastodon now. There is sort of a crazy woke wing to Mastodon, but they're in their own little world. So I was told to ignore them. And it was like one of the top guys who helped build the whole thing who was like, So I was kind of like, thank you. So now I'm feeling better about Mastodon. All right, guys, no more. It's on YouTube immediately. Yep. The show is on YouTube immediately. The second I stop, it's live on YouTube. So feel free to go there. And thanks, guys. I'm going to hang up because I'm trying to preserve my voice tonight, as I said. See you guys on Monday. Do check out the shop, the auction, because I put another Zelensky shirt up in the auction at Discord. That is due. That auction ends tomorrow. I found the Zelensky shirts, the green combat shirts that he wears. We found the shirt, the brand, the style. They are the shirts Zelensky buys. And we're auctioning them off. I've got a good supply of them. So we've got another one that is currently being auctioned. And I've also put some military patches. They're authentic military patches that go with the shirt, but you can use them otherwise. All right, guys, signing off. Sayonara. Thank you all. Burp, 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 burp.